morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is week 9 of the Introduction to the Culture of the 19th Century, and today's subject is quite broad. It could be further subdivided into smaller subjects. We'll be talking about leisure and pleasure. There is a chapter in Sally Mitchell's book if you want to read more about it. You can also find quite a lot of information about specific aspects of leisure activities in the Victorian world. But generally it could be subdivided into quite a few smaller subjects, each of which could be very interesting material, for example, for your final essay. So things like traditional celebrations, especially Christmas, summer holidays and tourism, sports, shows and other forms of entertainment available in the Victorian cities, and also private leisure activities to be enjoyed in private homes. So as you can see, quite a lot of stuff to cover, and all these things, of course, like any other aspect of culture, are the result of what was happening in the Victorian society, in the Victorian changing lifestyle. So it all boils down, as everything in the 19th century, to industrialization and urbanization. So let us now start perhaps with traditional celebrations, and especially Christmas. As you probably know already, when English-speaking people, British, American, talk about traditional Christmas, they usually mean Victorian Christmas. Most of the traditions, especially in Britain, that are popular in celebrating Christmas now have evolved, or at least popularized in the 19th century. And I'm talking about very popular traditions such as, for example, the Christmas tree. This is not a new custom, but it was not popular in Britain. This was a custom popular in German-speaking countries. And of course it was known in Britain, but it was mostly related to the royal court. Of course, the Hanoverian dynasty came from Germany, and the British kings married German princesses. Also, of course, Prince Albert was German, so there were a lot of family connections between the British royal family and Germany. And decorating a Christmas tree was a traditional part of Christmas celebrations there, but not really popular among the general public in Britain. This changed in the reign of Queen Victoria, because she liked this custom, and she started popularizing it. For example, whenever a member of the royal family visited some institution like, I don't know, a hospital or army barracks or something like that, before Christmas, they would bring a decorated Christmas tree as a present. So of course the institution who received it would then display it. The press, especially the illustrated press, would write about it, and so the middle class that liked copying the customs of the royalty would end up mimicking those customs. Before the Victorian period, there were two aspects of Christmas that rapidly go out of use in the Victorian period. The first one was that it was a religious celebration. Of course, it celebrates the birth of Jesus Christ, and this didn't change in the Victorian period. But the amount of religion, and especially this kind of solemn church celebrations, was greatly reduced in the 19th century. Some people still went to church, and some customs were connected with church observance. For example, on the second day of Christmas, called Boxing Day in England, one of the hypotheses for the etymology of this is that many churches had boxes for collecting money for charities displayed during Christmas season. So that's basically what you have. Just let me allow the cat to go out in the garden. Wychodź, Watson. And so some people still went to church at Christmas, but many didn't. They would limit their religious observance to singing some religious hymns and carols. Many of the traditional carols in the English language come from the 19th century, and they would be sung mostly by a choir, sometimes also to collect money for charities or just as part of holiday celebrations. Another part of the traditional ways to celebrate Christmas that was going out was community. So in villages, in small towns, celebrating Christmas was very often an affair to celebrate among neighbors, among the local community. There were some folk traditions, like the mummers, for example. The mummers were local people dressing up in some traditional fancy costumes, a little bit like kolędnice in Poland. So they would organize some sort of mock battles, for example, or plays, generally some sort of theatricals in which the local men and boys would be elaborately disguised. This really goes away. Also the custom of visiting neighbors, sharing food and especially drink with the neighbors. This is greatly reduced. So the old symbols go out of use, like the Yule log, a tradition of bringing a very large log of wood into the home and burning it throughout the Christmas season in a fireplace. Well, mistletoe remains. Perhaps it is even kind of refreshed as a tradition in the Victorian period on the wave of interest towards anything ancient, and the Celtic legacy of the mistletoe could be seen as the reason for it. Some of the traditional dishes, foods like the Christmas pudding, for example, also survive. However, they are replaced, for example, by growing popularity of poultry, of birds, so geese or turkey, because one thing is, of course, Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, a very popular story featuring many of the now traditional ways to celebrate Christmas. And another thing is the two aspects of Christmas that really come into fashion during the Victorian period, that is the centering of the celebrations on the family and children, and also the commercial aspect of celebrating Christmas, that is actually buying things, decorations, foodstuffs, presents, other things as well. There are some new inventions, completely new inventions, like a Christmas cracker. Some of you may be familiar with this custom. These are like tubes of cardboard paper with some small sweets or treats or even some small toys inside. They were used as plate decoration. When you pulled the two sides of the cracker, it kind of opened with a distinctive kind of sound and noise, like a little bang. So it was a new technology really used for this Christmas decoration that became extremely popular. You may ask yourself why. Because it appealed to children, and a family gathered around the table around some Christmas foods, or even the Christmas tree that originally was used as table decoration. Most Victorian homes, especially middle-class homes, had a big round table as a central thing in the parlor. This was used for dining, this was used for entertaining, this was used in the evening. We'll talk about it in a little while, for all kinds of leisure activities. So the family centered around this table becomes the focus of Victorian Christmas. So the family together, and of course the children becoming very important. And if you remember our discussion of the Victorian attitudes towards family life and motherhood, this absolutely affirms the importance of motherhood for the Victorians. I also mentioned the commercial side of Christmas, so still many things were made at home, and you can find quite a lot of videos on YouTube devoted to Victorian Christmas, and people doing decorations and some small presents, handmade presents, and of course checking out the recipes for traditional Christmas dishes. But more and more things are bought rather than made. I'm talking about decorations for Christmas tree. Some of the decorations that were extremely popular in the Victorian period are no longer popular today. For example, it was very fashionable in the mid-Victorian period to decorate the Christmas tree with little flags, either British flags or international flags. So this kind of decoration was very popular, and these things were bought. Also beautiful decorations made of wood or glass or straw or anything. More often than not, they were bought. Another thing that was extremely popular was sending postcards. Christmas postcards. They are really a Victorian institution, and if you look at some of the postcards, I'll try to upload the images for you on Moodle of some Christmas postcards I found, and they are quite surprising because they hardly ever feature any religious scenes, so like the nativity scene with Jesus and Mary and the three wise men or whatever. Sometimes you might have angels, but not really this kind of crib scene with baby Jesus. Also, well, winter is shown, but it isn't a rule. You might have a lot of Christmas postcards with Christmas messages and Christmas wishes printed on them, showing the scenes of summer, of warm weather, of lush vegetation. So something that perhaps people wanted to remind each other about during the Christmas season. So you find sometimes snow and even Santa Claus was also a kind of novelty. Father Christmas, as he was called in Britain, basically, rather than this kind of changed pronunciation of Saint Nicholas. But again, the traditional Santa Claus dressed in white and red is an early 20th century American invention from advertisements, so it's even later. So we have those Christmas postcards, which again are a wealth of knowledge and very surprising information about the Victorian culture and how it's different from ours. We have sometimes quite shocking things like soldiers or kind of scenes of military power presented in the Christmas postcards, or naked children that wouldn't be acceptable today, or some sort of racial jokes that also wouldn't be accepted today. Much of the cultural stereotypes and prejudice of Victorian culture is reflected in this area of popular culture, which is very new. It only was invented in the middle of the 19th century, of course, as a reaction to penny post a decade earlier, which introduced very reliable and cheap postal service, so people started to send letters more. But during Christmas season, when they were sending a lot of letters, they didn't really want to write long wishes to all the distant family members and acquaintances. So some printer came up with a brilliant idea of having an image and some short printed message that you could only add a few lines to and sign and put the address on and send. So this is a great popular thing. And you'll see this is the same thing happening with summer holidays. People also send postcards in great numbers. So the commercialization and the centering on the children and the family. Of course, the presents for children. The traditional way of distributing presents in the Victorian period was that children would find the presents packed around the Christmas tree early in the morning, so as soon as they woke up on Christmas Day. The most important celebration was on Christmas Day, and they would get the presents. They would share this family meal. And the concept of exchanging presents on Christmas Day is also relatively new in the Victorian period. Before, of course, exchanging presents was known, but it was not connected with Christmas Day. It was usually either on the New Year, so it was like good wishes for the coming year, or on the 6th of January, so the feast of the Three Kings or the Three Wise Men, as the remembrance of those characters from the Bible, giving some presents and gifts to baby Jesus. So as you can see, quite a lot of stuff happens, and not all of it, or at least not much of it, is culturally old. in the Victorian period. Another tradition connected with the Christmas season was to go and watch the pantomimes, or the panto as the Victorians would call it. So when we talk in a moment, what song? Uh, when we talk about the shows and performances, there is a special Christmas variation called the pantomime, with a lot of its own special traditions, such as the roles of the principal boy and the dame. A principal boy was usually the main hero, a young man, but he was always played by an attractive young woman dressed in male attire. On the other hand, a dame, who was an elderly lady, she could be a positive character, like a grandmother or some comical lady. It was usually a kind of comical character, a kind of scary comical. She could be a witch, for example. But this character was always played by a man wearing female clothes, but he was always played as a comical character. So the pantomime, so it's just gestures and movement and a lot of audience participation. This is again something that was extremely popular in the Victorian culture, and it links very well with other areas of entertainment. Another thing for Boxing Day was that in very many households this was the only day when the servants got a full day off. So the family spent an entire day without servants. However rich they were, they would eat leftover food and basically serve themselves, and the servants could visit their own families. So that's the first of, as you can see, many subjects, and we continue in a moment.